Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, LLC. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery program, and I don't claim to speak for any 12-step fellowship. My hope is that you will find my words helpful in some way, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 121, How to Harness the Power of Bookending When Setting Boundaries. If you're a fan of this podcast and want to support it, please check me out on Patreon. If you're not familiar, Patreon is a platform created by creators for creators that allows them to be supported and rewarded for their work by their fans and followers. You can find me at patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. In last week's episode, where Hope was my guest, she talked about having experiences in life as a result of recovery that we would never have had before recovery. And at the very end, I mentioned this concept of bookending. And I wanted to do a whole episode on it because I've gotten a number of inquiries about this recently from people not really knowing much about it. I did a huge workshop a few months ago. There was like 700 and something people on the workshop. And one of the people that followed up with me about it said, I've been researching this concept of bookending and I can't find it anywhere. You're literally the only person that I've been able to find who mentions it. Did you make it up? And I was like, nope, I totally didn't make it up. It's a concept I learned from recovery, but I don't remember where or when or from whom. Maybe it was from a podcast. I'm not really sure. I am going to go into more detail here since this was such a useful concept to me when I started setting boundaries, and it's been extremely helpful to my clients as well. But before I do that, I want to tell you about something super cool that's coming up, and that is that I am offering a 3-for-1 special on my membership community, Secure, Loved, and Brave. It's a monthly membership community where you get 2 monthly group coaching calls via Zoom. You get to be part of a private Facebook group for Secure, Loved, and Brave members, and that means that you can get support from me and the other people in the group between calls. And then there is a huge bonus of access to a ton of free resources, which are things like worksheets, journal prompts, and handouts, such as a forgiveness inventory. There's a whole self-love packet. There's also a cultivating happiness and joy packet, and a variety of other things. And then as another huge bonus, you get access to my signature course, 6 Weeks to Better Boundaries with Barb. It's got videos of me walking you through all the concept. Then there's also a multimedia curriculum to help you internalize those concepts, as well as worksheets to help you build your own better boundaries. And you can go through that course at your own pace. If you need coaching on it, then you can join the group coaching calls or reach out in the Facebook group. Normally, my membership community, Secure, Loved, and Brave, is $97 a month. But from August 16th through August 29th, 2021, I'm offering a buy 1 month, get 2 months free membership. You can visit my website, higherpowercc.com/membership, or go to the link on my bio on Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Or you can email me, barb@higherpowercc.com, so you can get the information for how to sign up for that. All right, back to bookending. This is a concept I learned in recovery, and I found it extremely helpful to have accountability partners. This works for me to this day. Example being my sponsor is one of my accountability partners. I text her every single day. And I also have 2 accountability partners for meditation. I meditate using the Ziva technique, and that means there's 2 meditations a day. And that second meditation is sometimes difficult for me to get in. So I have 2 people that are also meditators, and they let me know when they've completed their meditations as well. And I seriously doubt that I would meditate as consistently as I do without my accountability partners. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that this is similar to the concept I spoke about on a recent episode that's called How to Leverage Those Codependent Powers for Good. It's number 115, so you might want to listen to that. In any case, the idea of bookending is that when you have someone to be your accountability partner before and after doing something new, you bookend that something new with that person. And you do that by checking in with them before and after you do the thing. So this can be a very simple process or it can be very complex. A simple example of bookending could be that you text somebody ahead of time. You say, hey, I commit to walking for 30 minutes today. And then when you're done, you text them and you let them know that you did it. Now, of course, you want to get permission from the other person before you do this. And what I do with my meditation partners is a kind of bookending, except that I don't text them ahead of time because we have an understanding that I'm going to message them every day after I do my second meditation. So this is a very simple form of bookending as a way to hold yourself accountable. Then there is a much more complex kind of bookending that is very powerful when you're doing something that's really, really difficult. And because I do so much coaching on boundaries, the examples I use have to do with setting boundaries. And in fact, that's really how I used bookending in the first place, was learning how to set boundaries. Plus, it's an easy one for people to understand whether you need to set boundaries or not. You can follow the example that I'm using. So when you're starting to set boundaries, it's a good idea to start with really small boundaries, like boundaries with yourself. So for example, I'm not going to open that email until I get home from work. Once you've practiced a few smaller boundaries and they become relatively easy, you work your way up to setting more and more difficult boundaries. And when you get to the point where you need to set a very difficult boundary, this could be with someone very close to you, like your parents, a sibling, maybe your romantic partner, but it could also be someone like a boss. Whoever it is, this would be a situation where you know that you really need to set a boundary. And this is extremely helpful as a technique because it's likely to be that you're super nervous about setting such a boundary. And the way to use bookending in a case like this starts with picking someone who's emotionally safe and healthy, as well as supportive of you. So let's call them your boundary buddy. And you do this before the actual bookending begins. You talk with that person about what you want to do. You run your thoughts by them about what you want to say to the person you're setting a boundary with. Let's call that person the target of your boundary. So you run your thoughts by your boundary buddy about what you want to say to your boundary target, when you want to say it, and maybe your thoughts about the setting in which you're going to do it. And then your boundary buddy will help you think through whether it makes sense for you to use those particular words, to do it at that particular time in that particular setting. You talk about it with them, you get their feedback, but you make the ultimate decision. Then once you've made the decision about what to say, when you're going to do it and where, you let your boundary buddy know, this is the time and the day I'm going to do it. And I want to check in with you that day before I do it, as well as after it's over, so I can bookend my boundary setting with you. Now, the day comes when you're setting the boundary and you check in with your boundary buddy, likely on the phone, but perhaps in person. And one of the reasons you want to do that is to hold yourself accountable so that you'll actually go through with it. Another reason that it's important is so that they can be affirming and supportive of you. They can remind you that you're doing the right thing, you're not a bad person, you have nothing to feel guilty about, and that you deserve to live your life the way you want to live it, not the way other people want. And the other reason this is super helpful is that you can process all the difficult emotions that are coming up for you. If this is the first time you're setting a difficult boundary, you are going to be nervous. Maybe you're going to even be freaking out. I know that I definitely freaked out when I first started setting boundaries because it was such new behavior for me. And having helpful and supportive others to process the difficult emotions with is an absolute lifesaver. when you talk with them about how you're feeling and they support you through that, you're so much less likely to launch all those difficult emotions at the target of your boundary, which is the person you're setting the boundary with. If you don't bookend with someone else to have them help you process your difficult emotions before you meet with the boundary target, you're going to walk into that situation with all the emotions, which is the hardest part of boundary setting, and that's dealing with those emotions. And you don't want to launch those emotions at that person because that makes it much more likely to be a confrontational experience rather than just a simple, this is how things are going to be from now on. Now, for me, when I even thought about setting boundaries, I felt like I was going to die. And I'm not exaggerating. I felt like I was going to die. And it wasn't setting a boundary that made me feel like I was going to die. It was the emotions associated with setting the boundary that made me feel like I was going to die. If you've never set boundaries with others before, it's completely new behavior. You are differentiating yourself from them. You're saying, I'm no longer enmeshed with you. There's a boundary between you and I now. And that can be really scary. In fact, the guilt and shame people feel when first starting to set boundaries can be paralyzing. And that's why most people don't do it. They can't handle the guilt, shame, and other difficult emotions that arise. I personally, when I went through with it, found it very helpful to say out loud, I didn't die. And to say that to others when I told them about that I had just set a boundary, and I'd say, and I didn't die. And it reinforced for me that I did not, in fact, die, even though I felt like I was going to die. Now, back to the bookending. After you set the boundary with the person, that's when the second bookend comes in. You check back in with your boundary buddy, and here is where the magic happens. Because you have a kind, loving person to process your difficult emotions with. You don't want to do that with the target of your boundaries, which is why you're bookending with a safe, healthy other person. If you do this, that means you've processed your difficult emotions twice with them and you haven't launched them at the person who is the target of your boundaries. In addition to getting your boundary buddies affirmation and support and help with processing when you bookend, you know on a psychic level that you're not alone. Remember, humans are wired for connection. You know that boundary buddy is out there. They know where you are. They know what you're doing. They know what you're going through, what you're feeling, because you shared all of that with them. That is, you are connected to them. And here's why that's important. Most people who don't have healthy boundaries have no experience with healthy separation. We're used to either enmeshment or abandonment or both. That means when we go to set a boundary, it can feel like abandonment to us. But if we're connected to this boundary buddy by their love and their support and them knowing where we are, what we're doing, then you know you're not abandoned. If you've only experienced enmeshment or abandonment, you have no concept of what healthy separation means. So setting boundaries can feel like abandonment rather than healthy separation. And here's the thing about abandonment. It doesn't matter who initiates it. For example, if you break up with someone because it's a super dysfunctional relationship, you can still feel abandoned even though you're the one that initiated the separation. Because they were there and then they're not, which if you have a history of abandonment means you're abandoned. So even though you're the one setting the boundary, it may feel like abandonment, but it's not. Setting boundaries means coming out of enmeshment, delineating the boundaries of who you are, and differentiating yourself as your own distinct person with your own distinct identity and preferences. And so that is why it can feel like abandonment, because you're no longer enmeshed with others. Bookending with this safe, healthy other person, your boundary buddy, lets you know I'm not abandoned. I'm still connected to this other person. So if you need to do something difficult, whether it's setting a healthy boundary or something different, getting support from someone else can be absolute magic. If there's a scenario that's popped in your head right now about something difficult you've needed to do that you think bookending would come in handy for, I really encourage you to use it. And I would love to hear how it worked for you. You can send me an email, barb@higherpowercc.com. I really mean it. I'd love to hear how this worked for you. Talk to you next week. That's it for today. If you've been finding this podcast helpful, please consider a donation to ensure I can continue. To choose the level of support that feels right to you, go to patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. Please also review it on Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe to it on your favorite podcast outlet. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps others to find the podcast. Now, if someone in particular came to mind when you listened to this episode, please share it with them. And don't forget, I'm on Instagram at Higher Power Coaching. I run group and private coaching programs on creating healthy boundaries. And if that sounds like something that would interest you, head on over to barbchat.net, where you can get on my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, then go to barbchat.net and get on my calendar. My goal with all of my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.